Dear colleagues, speakers, and participants, it's a real pleasure to welcome you today. My name is David Morgado. I'm Senior Energy Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. I'm your chair for this thematic track on innovative low-carbon technologies, and I sincerely hope you enjoyed the program we've put together for you over the next 3 days. Today is our first session of this thematic track, which will focus on integrating low-carbon technologies to accelerate the energy transition. On Wednesday, tomorrow, we will have a session on promoting a circular economy concept and decarbonization within the energy sector. And we conclude on Thursday with our third session on embedding climate resilient and adaptation strategies in energy systems. But let's focus today on today and the importance of innovative low carbon technologies. According to the International Energy Agency, we remain on a net zero emission pathway today, which will imply a massive deployment of all available clean energy technologies, from renewables to energy efficiency and more. Majority of the emission reduction needed by 2030 will come from available technologies. However, by 2050, almost half the emission reductions will come from technologies that are currently at demonstration or prototype phase. Therefore, there's an immediate need for innovative research and development in the next 10 years so that these technologies are available on time. However, according to the International Energy Agency, only 2 out of 46 energy technologies and sectors are on track with the International Energy Agency's net zero emissions by 2050 scenario. Therefore, we definitely need to do more, and this is why we have set up this thematic track at the ASEF this year. More importantly, we believe that investing in innovative low-carbon technologies can help us address the 3 major and urgent challenges we have today. That is climate change, post-pandemic recovery, and more recently, the energy crisis. With this context and background, it's my pleasure to introduce you to my colleague, Kelly Hewitt, who will moderate this session. Kelly is Principal Energy Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. She joined the bank in 2011, and she has been implementing both sovereign and non-sovereign projects and programs across Asia and the Pacific. She's currently leading ADB's energy work in Central West region. She has extensive experience in power and gas market regulation and reform, energy efficiency, climate mitigation, and renewable energy. She previously worked at the US Department of Energy and was head of USAID's energy program in Bangladesh. Kelly, thank you for moderating this session. The floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm excited to kick off this track on innovative low carbon technologies. What we have today are brilliant speakers who are going to talk about several things during this session. The first being the importance of multi-party and multi-sector communications and collaboration in accelerating the energy transition, people to people, and technology platforms. Secondly, we'll hear how new technology can help and not to lose sight of SDG 7 and the region's continued effort to ensure affordable and clean energy for all. Thirdly, we'll have a discussion on how large conventional energy companies are transforming their strategy and core business to carbon neutral products, such as CCUS. And fourth, we'll talk about the continuing importance of energy efficiency and conservation in ensuring energy for all and in speeding up the energy transition to achieving net zero carbon emissions. Please, before we get started, allow me to introduce the 4 brilliant energy sector professionals that are with us in this session today. We have Koji Takahashi. Koji is the Deputy Director of the Global Environmental Affairs Office in the Industrial Science and Technology Policy and Environment Bureau of Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry. Koji will share in his presentation how the Cleaner Energy Future Initiative of ASEAN, also known as CEFIA, is accelerating the deployment of clean energy and low carbon technology in the region. We also have Garrick Lee. Garrick is a senior off-grid advisor at USAID's Papua New Guinea Electrification Partnership, also known as USAID PEP. Garrick leads the program's work on off-grid electrification. He will speak to us today about how USAID PEP is helping market participants understand opportunities for mini-grid development through GIS and market analyses across PNG. We're also honored to have Li Ping Yu. Li Ping is Vice President and Managing Director of Shell's carbon capture and storage business in Asia. She's part of a global team developing CCS projects and opportunities, including shaping new emerging positions in lower carbon products and sectoral decarbonization. Li Ping will present today on the essential aspect of CCS in accelerating the region's transition to a low carbon economy. And we are privileged to have with us Shah Zulfikar Haider. Shah is a technical advisor at Mitsubishi Research Institute. Shah has many years of experience in rural electrification, energy efficiency, renewables, and conservation. He will speak to us today about how low-cost financing in Bangladesh is enhancing energy efficiency and conservation, and hence transitioning the country closer to its 2030 carbon emission reduction targets. Indeed, welcome Koji, Garrick, Li Ping, and Shah. Let's get started. We'll aim to keep each presentation to no more than 10 minutes so that we have time after all presentations in this session for discussion and Q&A. Koji, please, could I ask you to proceed with your presentation on CEPHIA? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for introducing me. And my name is Koji Takahashi, Deputy Director of Global Environment Affairs Office in the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Japan. And it's my pleasure to join this workshop to share Japan's international contribution in the area of climate change. At this opportunity, I'd like to briefly explain about Cleaner Energy Initiative for ASEAN as one of the Japan's contribution to accelerating the deployment of cleaner energy and the decarbonization technology in the ASEAN region. This is the key component of CEPHIA. CEPHIA has been implemented as a part of cooperation for Asian countries, expressed by Mr. Kishida, Japan's Prime Minister in COP26 at Glasgow last year. Japan considers that energy transition and the introduction of decarbonization technology, supporting such technology to energy transition is quite important. By this reason, Japan proposed CEPHIA as a public-private initiative in the ASEAN +3 Energy Ministerial meeting in 2019, and our proposal was welcomed by the energy ministers. Under this initiative, we have 3 components you can see on the screen. Introduction of the decarbonization technologies, coupled with institution of a regulatory framework to facilitate such technologies, and the facilitation of finance that could support decarbonization project. As such, I think that CEPHIA is a quite unique initiative compared with other cooperative frameworks. And okay. This is and we have this is a structure of CEPHIA. This is explained about flagship project. This flagship project means showcases good practice of cooperation for technology in parallel with developing appropriate policy and institutional framework as well as finance. And we have currently we have some potential key sectors like you can see in the down this sheet, energy efficiency and conservation, and renewable energy, and digitalization, utilization of IT, and others. At this time, we have flagship project in the finance. Okay, this is the example of the flagship project. This is called Lenkei control project. Lenkei means it's a Japanese word whose meaning is partnership or collaboration. So Lenkei control is energy saving technology that is by applying this technology, each individual devices or equipment are linked to each other to improve their performance and thereby realize significant energy savings. You can understand more about this concept if you see a chart in the middle of this slide. Originally, Plan A to D was operated individually, but linkage by the Lenkei control technologies enables these plants to be operated more efficiently and leads to energy saving. Since application of this technology need no replacement or with high efficiency equipment, it is quite meaningful for users. This is another example of flagship project. This means zero energy building, so-called ZEV project. Like Lenkei control, ZEV project is seeking a high level of energy efficiency in the building and toward zero energy. And ZEV project has 3 steps according to the energy saving rate. You can find left bottom. ZEV ready, nearly ZEV, or net ZEV. This is different according to the energy saving rate. So currently, Japanese companies are promoting introduction of international standard TS 23764 and hosting seminar and workshop to facilitate understanding on ZEV for ASEAN nations. Japanese companies are also preparing a demonstration project to apply necessary technologies to the existing buildings in the ASEAN countries. If today's audience is interested in Lenkei control and the ZEV project, please contact with me later. I can connect you to Japanese companies implementing these projects. And this is a brief summary of the current action to facilitate finance. We consider this is as one of the flagship projects, but unlike the previous 2 projects, the current main action is capacity building program for ASEAN local financial institutions, so that such institutions could raise their capacity and to provide finance to the decarbonization project in the ASEAN region. So far, we have hosted several workshops and seminars for ASEAN local financial institutions to enhance regional capabilities or exchange of experiences among financial institutions. For your reference, we concluded a memorandum of cooperation with ADB and SAFIA in 2020. The fees for cooperation are energy efficiency and conservation and other decarbonization technologies and utilization of private funds. As an example of the cooperative actions, METI and IDB will seek a development and implementation of the flagship project. And under the SAFIA, we have hosted the annual government-private forum to review relevant activities and to discuss on certain topics for the future activities. The last forum was held in February this year. Then we invited some high-rank officials for remarks from Japan and ASEAN countries. And it's followed by discussion on the flagship project, collaboration roadmap, and finance. So this next forum will be held in the next year, but not decided the timing. But this is open forum, so we welcome participation of today's audience. Finally, I'd like to little touch on the SAFIA collaboration roadmap that was discussed in the last forum. ASEAN has its own cooperation plan in the energy sector, so-called called ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation. It's APIC. Currently, APIC is in the course of phase 2, and one of the SAFIA's purpose is a contribution to the APIC. So we are now discussing a collaboration roadmap with ASEAN member states in order to realize our intention of cooperation to ASEAN. This is all of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Koji. Really, really interesting hearing about SAFIA and all the details with regard to communications, collaboration, all the different platforms, and the actual Zero Energy Building Energy Award. That's rather interesting. It's going to be very informative to share some of the progress there. But we'll talk more after all the presentations. Again, thank you, Koji. For now, if we could move to the second presentation, Garrick, we are happy to hear from you with regard to USAID PEP. Please, Garrick. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. And hi, everyone. So I'll be presenting on the USAID Papua New Guinea Electrification Partnership activity, and specifically our GIS analysis as a tool to spur off-grid market development. So the USAID PNG Electrification Partnership, or USAID PEP, is a 5-year project partnership with the government of PNG to advance the country's journey to self-reliance by contributing significantly to achieving the goal of connecting 70% of PNG's population to electricity by 2030. And this came out of the APEC summit in 2018, where the countries of PNG, US, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan came together to form the PNG Electrification Partnership. And USAID PEP is one of the components of the partnership, and it's the US government's contribution to the partnership. So under the USAID PEP program or activity, we are focused on facilitating at least 200,000 new on-grid and off-grid household electricity connections. And I'll talk a bit more about how we're doing that. So basically, we're implementing the program through 4 main objectives or work streams. So the first objective is focused on strengthening PNG Power's financial viability and operational efficiency. That's the national utility. The second objective is focused on developing viable off-grid electrification models. So that's what this presentation will be focused on, the off-grid market. And the third objective is focused on enhancing the PNG's energy regulator, which is the National Energy Authority, which is a brand new regulator that we're helping to get set up. And objective 4 is focused on catalyzing private investment for energy projects. So basically bringing in private investment for electrification. And then we have a number of activities around government engagement, gender, and community engagement as well under the USAID PEP activity. So the way the USAID PEP activity is being implemented is through a consortium of experts in utility, off-grid, regulatory, private investment, and community engagement. So it's led by RTI International, who are an energy specialist, and supported by a number of consortium partners, Oil Search Foundation, who are community engagement specialists in PNG, NAOS Advisory, who are utility reform specialists, Energy and Security Group, which is a specialist in energy and off-grid, Delphos International, a financial advisory firm specializing in developing countries, Frame, our GIS specialists, who will be talking more about what they've worked on in this program, Kaizen, who are capacity building specialists, and Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, who are renewable energy modeling and integration specialists. So the expected impacts of the program over the 5 years are provided on the screen there. I won't go through it all, but under the off-grid component, we're focused on facilitating 210,000 new off-grid household connections, 10,000 connections from mini-grids, including 20 mini-grids installed, and providing business support to over 20 off-grid solar companies as well. So under Objective 2, the off-grid objective, our focus is on off-grid areas, which are defined as at least 10 kilometers away from the PNG power transmission and distribution grid. So PNG Power is a national utility, and you can see on the screen there their coverage around the country. So they have a number of centers around the country, up in East Sepik here, in East New Britain, here in New Ireland, and Port Moresby, of course, and then the transmission grid that goes up through the highlands. But as you can see, most of the country is not covered by the PNG power transmission and distribution grid. So that's our focus in the off-grid objective. And we put together this GIS tool, this GIS platform, to help us identify areas to focus on in the off-grid space. And not just help us, but help the government, help the PNG, the utility PNG Power, as well as off-grid companies, private sector companies. So the way we put together this platform is through the use of a number of data sources. So some of those on the screen there. So customer billing data from PNG Power, as well as household level social demographic data from the 2016 to 2018 PNG Demographic and Health Survey. So that includes questions on household asset ownership, access to services, other social demographic data that was used to group households into wealth quintiles. And then we use power consumption values for electrical assets from the PNG National Electrification Rollout Plan. And where these figures weren't available, we use estimates from multi-tier framework surveys in Ethiopia and Zambia, and SMAP's 2015 Beyond Connections Energy Access Redefined report. We also use high-resolution population density maps from Facebook. This is completely separate from the Facebook social media app. This is data that Facebook collects on population density using satellite images. So we use that to help provide population estimates at 30-meter resolution across PNG. And then we aggregated these into 4 kilometer squared parcels to account for the maximum reach of a mini grid. So I'll show you a demonstration of the platform and what that looks like, the 4 kilometer squared parcels. We also use location data for potential institutional customers. So these included data from OpenStreetMaps, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, to map the locations of schools, medical centers, and roads, and the US Geological Survey to map the location of mining sites, and OpenCell ID to map the location of cell towers. And then we use high-resolution satellite imagery from Maxar as well, with images from 2012 to 2022. So some of our findings from aggregating this data was the distribution of households across the country. So on the left there, you can see in these different blue colors, the household counts per 4 kilometer squared parcel. So each of those dots you can see there is a 4 kilometer squared parcel. and the darker the blue of the dot indicates the greater amounts of households in that area, in that parcel. So you can see on the map that most of the country is very sparsely populated and has no population actually within those 4 kilometer square parcels. And then, yeah, so what we found was there was a total number, the total number of households was 1.82 million across the country, and 0.27 million of those were estimated to have electricity, while rural households were estimated to be 1.53 million, or 84% of the population. So yeah, some of the other findings from our analysis was looking at whether these parcels, these 4 kilometer squared parcels, were more appropriately served by solar home systems or standalone solar, or mini grids, or grid extension or grid expansion. So we defined some values to sort these parcels into. So where there were fewer than 100 households in that 4 kilometer squared parcel, we determined that that was more appropriate for standalone solar. And where there was 100 to 320 households in that parcel, it was more viable for mini grids. And where there was more than 320 households, it was a high potential mini grid. These are areas off the grid. And then where the parcels were within 1 to 10 kilometers from the grid, that's where grid extension was most appropriate, and within 1 kilometer from the grid, grid expansion. So based on that, you can see that 24% of the population is best served by standalone solar, and 22% by mini grids, and then grid extension and grid expansion are more suitable for the remaining parcels or areas in the country. And this graph just shows a bit more about the sparsely populated characteristic of PNG. So over half the population, or half of the populated 4 kilometer squared parcels, have fewer than 20 people. And while population density is quite low, most households are found in 4 kilometer squared parcels with at least 100 households. Okay, so I'll just do a brief demonstration. I know I don't have much time left. So this is, I'm just going to bring up the platform. So this is what it looks like. On the bottom right here, you can see the rubric results showing the colors for the different parcels and what's the most appropriate method to provide electrification in that parcel. And so you can search for locations here. So here I'm searching for Moorhead in Western Province, and it's going to zoom into that location. And since I'm streaming on Zoom at the same time, it might be a bit slower. But basically what you can see here are the parcels zoomed into. One sec, yep. So yeah, so that dark blue indicates that there's a viable mini grid here. And we can even see the household distributions or the building distributions in that area. So I've just applied that filter, and now it will show you where all the buildings are or the households are. So over here, you can see they're quite densely packed in one side of this parcel. So this is likely a good mini grid site. And if I click on this parcel as well, it will give me some more information. So you can see the population's 1,715 people, the number of households 316. The estimated community demand in kilowatt hours per month is 3,288. Similarly, the average household demand. So that's just a bit of a quick run through of the platform. I think I'm out of time, but happy to answer any questions in the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Greg. And that is truly helpful, using GIS technology and all of the marketing surveys and other things to ascertain who's not being served in remote areas. Extremely helpful, and I look forward to talking to you more about it after our presentations. Again, thank you. So let's go to our next presenter, and that is going to be Li Ping. She will speak to us about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Li Ping, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly, and good afternoon to everyone. Perhaps before I start, just a quick clarification of my title. I am the Vice President and Managing Director of Shell Upstream Indonesia. However, I am also the General Manager for Carbon Capture and Storage in Asia. And in that capacity, I lead Shell's CCS business here, developing a number of CCS projects across the region and shaping new energy positions in the lower carbon products and sectoral decarbonization. So today, I would like to discuss the vital role of carbon capture and storage to Asia Pacific's pursuit of a low carbon economy. I would like to firstly touch upon the case for CCS, and then secondly, I would move on to the value proposition of CCS. Then last but not least, how do we enable CCS deployment? So CCS plays a critical role in the acceleration of clean energy solutions to help with the complex dual challenge the world faces today. And that is combining economic progress on one hand and access to energy with achieving net zero emissions on the other. This dual approach is very much in line at the core of how Shell is rising to the challenge of the energy transition. Our Powering Progress strategy launched last year is designed to accelerate the transition of our business to net zero emissions by 2050, and our CCS strategy is a key pillar to support the achievement of these targets. Now, our approach focuses not only on getting to net zero emissions, but on how we do it, with respect for nature, support for livelihoods, and in a transparent way. So last month, we reported for the first time on the progress we have made towards our net zero targets, and this included achieving our first short-term target to reduce the carbon intensity of the energy products we sell, as well as about an 18% reduction in the absolute emissions from our operations on a net basis compared to 2016. Now, our investment in the production of low-carbon fuels, solar and wind power, as well as hydrogen, have been vital in delivering this outcome. Globally, we are already a major developer of renewable power with over 40 gigawatts of renewable generation capacity in operation, under construction or in pipeline of future projects today. Now, in this region, this includes a 1.4 gigawatt South Korean floating offshore wind farm, enough to power over 1 million homes. It also includes rooftop solar through our investment in Cleantech Solar, headquartered here in Singapore. Now, in China, we started up a 20 megawatt hydrogen electrolyzer with the capacity to produce up to 3,000 tons of hydrogen from wind power each year. And that is enough to power about 500 buses for a total of about 35 million kilometers. And if by any chance any of you had attended the Winter Olympics in Beijing earlier this year, you may have traveled on one of these buses powered by this hydrogen. In Malaysia, we announced recently in partnership with Porsche Asia Pacific, we will equip 6 Shell stations with the fastest electric car chargers across the country, as well as Singapore, and later right up to Bangkok in Thailand. Now, in Singapore as well, we are transforming our Bukom refinery into an energy and chemicals park, focusing first on the circularity of products, for example, with waste plastics going into new chemical products. And we are also working towards supplying biofuels, advanced lubricants, and renewable energy in the future. And this in turn helps reduce the carbon footprint of not just Singapore as a country, but for other sectors, other customers in aviation and heavy industries which use these products. Helping to change supply, like what we are currently doing in these countries in Asia, is absolutely important, but it is not enough. So Michelle, if you could kindly move to slide 6, please. Because the energy transition is not just about supply, it is about demand as well. Customers want low and zero carbon products and have the right equipment to use them. That is why we work closely with our customers, especially in sectors such as aviation, marine, road freight, as well as industrial customers who produce steel, cement, and chemicals. These types of heavy industry require high temperatures, and so they cannot easily run on electricity through power generation. These sectors, like others, need to first avoid altogether and otherwise then reduce the CO2 emissions. For the remaining harder to abate emissions, technology offers a solution in the form of carbon capture and storage, or CCS. CCS is vital to heavy industry in producing low carbon hydrogen and in generating low carbon power. And the latest report from IPCC recognizes this vital role of CO2 removal in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. An example of this would be our Quest project in Canada, which has just reached a milestone of 7 million tons stored, the same as the annual emissions from around 1.7 million cars. The potential of CCS is great, and Shell has helped to develop this. Our CANSOLV CO2 system, for example, is one of the large-scale CCS technologies in commercial operations today. Now, it offers an efficient way to capture and separate out CO2 from industrial gases. Since the start of 2021, Shell CANSOLV technology has been selected for 6 other projects. So together with these projects, we aim to capture about 12 million tons of CO2 a year. In the US, we've built the world's first large capacity pipeline to transport CO2 from Colorado to West Texas. And we also play a major role in developing the world's first ships to transport liquid CO2, where it's not possible to lay pipelines from the sources to the storage facility. As well as the 2 CCS projects that we have in operation, we are assessing 10 more potential opportunities. This is a good start, but again, it is nowhere enough. The IPCC scenario calls for the equivalent of at least 1 Quest-sized project to start up every 3.5 days for the next 30 years. So alone, we would never come close to realizing the scale of CCS that is required. For this to happen, we need 3 things. Michelle, could you kindly move to slide 7, please? First, we require the collaboration between companies, and that is absolutely vital. It does not make sense for a CCS facility to be connected to a single source of emission. Now, companies need to unite around their shared need to cut CO2 emissions from power plants and factories. And this coming together will really enable the design of shared transportation systems, pipelines, shipping, storage facilities for the benefit of all. Second, while these networks are built and honed over time to become more efficient, partners will need to accept some bumps along the way, from those capturing the CO2 to those transporting and then storing it. Given the tight margins on CCS, the economics of projects may be lower at the start. Third, and absolutely vital, is that CCS developers are supported by the right policies for the long term, such as a carbon price mechanism and frameworks that encourage demand for low carbon products. The right policies can help also countries without suitable geology for storage that will need to export their CO2. And when Koji-san shared about Sophia initiative, that is exactly the type of initiative that we would be very, very keen and very much looking towards, where they combine technology development with financing, with policy framework, and particularly right across the board, cross-border in ASEAN. So all 3 of those points above underline that CCS is not something that can be made a success by any one company or any one country. It will require deep collaboration between companies, with governments, and crucially across borders, as I had mentioned before. Now, this is already starting to happen. In January, for example, Shell signed an agreement with Petronas to jointly explore potential CCS opportunities in Malaysia, including a study that would look into the feasibility of CO2 storage locations for regional stores. Now, we are also looking at potential CCS storage opportunities elsewhere within this region in Asia Pacific. In Europe, we are looking with other companies and governments on a project that will allow CO2 to be captured from industries in the Netherlands and Germany, and then transported for storage below the sea off the coast of the Netherlands. In Norway, we are building an undersea storage system together with our partners. This is the first CCS project that focuses on the transport of CO2 on ships, and Shell is leading in this aspect. The first vessels are already being assembled, and it is worth noting the onboard storage systems are designed to suit standard size ships, thereby offering an economic and long-term solution. Building more collaborations such as these has the potential to deliver immense results. When it comes to CCS, I believe we have all the elements to make it a success, and I see them all represented here today, here in Asia. So I therefore ask that we move together to seize the technological and commercial opportunities CCS offers, helping to make the energy transition a reality. Thank you very much.
Li-Ping, thank you so much. Quite a bit of activity taking place here in Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. A lot of collaboration. I see that as a recurring theme through our presentations. It's an absolute must as we move forward with the energy transition. And we'll talk more about it after we finish with the presentations. Let's move now to Shaw, who will be presenting on the necessity of energy efficiency and conservation and moving us along the low carbon pathways. Shaw, over to you.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as per your location. Konnichiwa. I would like to speak on energy efficiency and conservation through low-cost financing in Bangladesh. So even say around 10 or 15 years ago, we had less than 50% of electrification and power crisis was an issue. Energy efficiency and conservation was peaceful affair. We were not much adapted to it. Then Japanese government through JICA, they come up to Bangladesh and offered us to assist in preparing master plan for energy efficiency and conservation. It had 5 pillars. First one was energy management program. Even ISO 50001 is about energy management. And building is an important part of energy efficiency globally. And they had an energy efficiency building program, an energy efficiency labeling program. It's very important. You must have seen in air conditions or refrigerator, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. The more star, the more efficient they are. Then the best one was energy efficiency financing program, low interest loans, subsidies, etc. But for all this, awareness raising program through stakeholders was most important. They were also involved in it also. Since it was prepared in 2014-15, so this year was 2013-14 Bangladesh, the fiscal year starts from July to June. It had ambitious target of achieving 15% reduction in primary energy consumption per GDP by 2021, 20% reduction in primary energy consumption per GDP by 29-30. The benefit will that electricity demand will be reduced by 7,400 megawatt by 29-30 against our anticipated peak demand of 40,000 megawatt. Emission reduction will be great, 246 million tons, and Bangladesh is less emitter as per person per year emission is 0.4 ton per year against global average of 4.47. The final consumption is in Bangladesh about transport is 16%, industry is 48%, residential 29%, and commercial is 3%. The master plan will be dealing with industry, residential, and commercial. Let's have a look about industrial sector. It has 48%, it has an efficiency potentiality of 21% and non-feasible 10%. So if we can achieve this 21%, this becomes a picture. On overall national level, the energy efficiency, it will reduce our demand by 10%. Similarly, in the case of residential sector, it is around 29% and potentially it has got 28.8%. And non-feasible is 7.1%. If theoretically we can achieve this 28.8%, this becomes our picture. For example, our fan load is 29.2%, it comes to 21.9%, and overall saving in national level will be 8%. The best is about the commercial sector. If you replace the air condition with energy efficient inverter air conditions, lighting system with high efficient lighting, while digital technologies are to be also added, then we can have a gigantic saving of 50% of total building sector. That means at national level, it is 1.5%. So Based on these three sectors, we'll have a saving of around 19 to 20%. This is a big saving for a country like Bangladesh. But the question is, from consumer point of view, from industrial point of view, why energy efficiency? Energy is too cheap to be made efficient. In Bangladesh, energy, especially electricity sector, is quite subsidized. And industries say that energy cost is around 10% of my total operating and maintenance cost. So why should I go for energy efficiency? And funding is a problem. You have to go through so many formalities. Lending rates were almost 10%, that to compound lending rates, and lack of awareness about life cycle cost. This was the main problem, because markets were flooded with inefficient, less costly electrical gadgets like air conditioning. The inefficient products, they used to consume around cost around 50% of against an energy efficient product, but they consume more than double the electricity, which the consumer very ignorant. So energy efficient financing program, JICA came up with low interest loan under energy efficiency and conservation promotion financing project. It extended to industries to remove cost barriers in buying energy efficient products. Total amount in two phases was 240 million USD. And best thing was that there was a digital data analysis statistic handling system was developed to monitor the progress. The normal lending rate in Bangladesh is 10%, but against which for this project it was only 4%. And this is energy efficient conservation promotion financing project JICA has been handling. They are giving funding to Bangladesh government, and Bangladesh government is giving fund to two fiscal institutions. One is ITCOL, Infrastructure Development Company Limited. Another is BIFFL, Bangladesh Infrastructure Finance Fund Limited. Two companies were selected to avoid monopoly. Then the government nodal agency called Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. It is entrusted with energy efficiency, conservation, and renewable energy, sustainable energy for Bangladesh. JICA supported technically to SEDA to build up energy efficient equipment list and to assess how much energy efficiency can be there. Now, for any industrialist, he applies to ITCOL or BIFFL as per his choice. They do the preliminary survey whether the project is energy efficient or not, whether the fund of at 4% interest is misused or not, and they give it to SEDA for technical evaluation. SEDA, they evaluate technically, and if they found the feasible, then they give no objection certificate to the financial institution to issue the loan. Then loan agreement is signed, and the industrialists, they go for energy efficient equipment from the vendors. And any energy efficient equipment globally available is acceptable. So this was the best thing of this. But best thing was that in order to implement this energy efficiency, massive awareness was required. Through this project, we have been doing awareness to government officials, business, politicians. Like, see, this was a meeting where a member of parliaments, chamber leaders, high officials, they were all stakeholders were present, and here I gave presentation on how we can adopt energy efficiency conservation. Then schooling program, the girls' schools, they are doing relay on energy conservation. Then school, we are teaching them how to adopt energy efficiency. Education to the elderly, you can see here. Then best part of that, before pandemic, everywhere we had energy and power week, where we used to have different events, seminars, and those doing good in energy efficiency conservation, they were rewarded. Broadcast audio visual through TV, radio, social media like LinkedIn Network, webinar training was the best part of it. Then energy efficiency conservation awareness through LinkedIn and Facebook. We have got a page, Energy Saving and Efficiency Campaign in LinkedIn, and another in Facebook, Energy Efficiency, campaign Bangladesh in Facebook. Achievements so far. Despite pandemic and now present global turmoil, the disruption in supply chain, and even if you give the loan, it takes time to procure the material, install it. So far, we have achieved 117 gigawatt of energy gigawatt hour per year. Then 32 megawatt hour has been relieved. You know, cost of 1 megawatt hour production construction cost is more than $1 million plus operating cost. Best was emission reduction, 70K ton of carbon emission reduction, and we have given training to 2,100 man-hour training has been given so far. This training was helpful. It was given to stakeholders, to industrialists, to government officials to understand what is energy efficiency and conservation. Impact of the project. Industry's cost of production decreased, so they were more competitive. But everything remains open. The other industries were not much concerned about energy efficiency. They also came to know that, oh, the other industry is having energy efficiency. So for sake of competition, other industries also came up to their own arrangement to have energy efficiency. Export price become competitive. Bangladesh export is a pride. So for example, even 25 years ago, we were subcontracted in textile and garment. But after adopting energy efficiency, we are now one of the global leaders in textile and garment. Our location is second or third globally, and it has brought economic boom. Overall electricity demand has decreased, emission has been reduced. Best is that new employment avenues have been built up. Because of these advantages, Bangladesh is still sustaining in present global recession. And the credit goes to our Honorable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. She was the main for this energy efficient conservation. Today, Bangladesh has got 100% electrification and we have got sustainable energy. In our Energy and Power Week 2018, our Madam Prime Minister said, and there is no shame in turning off switch while leaving the room. This is something I do myself, though I am Prime Minister. Therefore, I encourage everyone to use electricity as if it is your own and bring out an embedding conviction to save, conserve it. Sheikh Hasina, Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Well, that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shah. We had some questions coming in as you all were speaking, specifically with regard to the last presentation and also Koji's presentation on energy efficiency. And so one of the questions we have from one of the participants is basically, is energy efficiency, which is been successful, not just in Bangladesh, but in other locations, does it clash with acquisition of new technology? In the case of the participant, they were questioning whether there was a clash with regard to acquisition of a new inverter technology. And the way I interpret it is basically, is there an issue of stranded investment when it comes to energy efficiency, especially if it works? Let me just stop here. And Garrick, I'm sorry, Koji, I'll ask you first, whether or not there is a need for a new equation in terms of how we see the energy system. Should we be looking at it differently? And if so, how? So the issue of stranded investment or energy efficiency or greater efficiencies are decoupled from the whole concept of providing more for energy access. Again, I'll stop here. Koji, I'll go to you, and then afterward, we'll give the other panelists an opportunity to also respond. Koji?
Sorry, thank you. It's a question, important question. But I'm sorry, I cannot understand all of you said. So could you repeat a little again about your questions?
Yes, no problem, Koji. The issue is one of energy efficiency being so successful, particularly, some of the standards that CEFIA is providing with regard to building awards and things like that. There's a great deal of investment in new technology as well in terms of traditional systems. Is there concern for clashing with existing systems and moving forward with new ventures and energy efficiency? What's your perspective on that?
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. And your question, but we think in the last long years, basically especially in Japan, electric consumption of energy is becoming increase year by year. So under this situation, of course, energy and efficiency and the conservation it's quite important, because we have to. This is from the climate change side. We have to reduce energy consumption first. But if energy efficiency and conservation technology becoming higher, but I don't think it's of course some contribution to energy consumption, but it lead to no energy consumption, so just reduction. So, but we have, and the cost is becoming higher, and in the response of the higher cost, so we have to. There are many ways to in response of the higher energy cost. One is the energy efficiency, but another is development of technology and low cost energy. So I think this is not one choice. We have to maintain a variety of energy and a variety of option. So energy efficiency, and if we develop energy efficiency technologies, also in one hand, and we need more energy saving energy, or variety of energy technology. So now, of course, in Japan we are discussing in conventional energy supply and new and energy efficiency, and new energy development. We are parallelly, of course, we have some prioritization, but basically all have to be implemented parallelly. So now currently we have in Japan's case, we have no concern about energy efficiency, higher energy efficiency with this kind of crashes and new technology development. I think both are parallelly important. So especially, I think it is the same as ASEAN countries. So of course, this is our understanding. And of course, we are Japan under my colleague in another energy section implement, of course, energy efficiency cooperation, and of the other type of cooperation, renewable energy or ammonia or something. This is
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, energy efficiency and conservation provides for additional energy, particularly for those who do not have access or need more reliability. Which brings me to another question that we have from our participants. It's somewhat related to looking at traditional systems, energy systems, particularly power systems, in the off-grid technologies and opportunities for servicing additional customers, as well as expanding additional services. Garrett, can I ask you, the question comes in, what are the tariffs? What are the rates for on-grid as compared to off-grid? There's quite a bit of information with regard to, quite obviously, small renewables, particularly solar, and being quite competitive. Yet, nonetheless, the participant has asked this question. Can you provide some information? And any of the other panelists, please chime in if you know as well. Thank you. Garrick?
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah. So, yeah, the tariff definition is very important in off-grid areas. In off-grid areas in developing countries like PNG, the populations are largely rural and very low income. So defining the right tariff for them is kind of crucial. The issue in Papua New Guinea is there's one tariff for the whole country, a regulated tariff, which is the same in Port Moresby as it is in rural areas. And currently there's an off-grid regulation being finalized for adoption or almost being adopted by the government. And that there's an election happening right now in Papua New Guinea, so hopefully that will be adopted after the election. And at that point, the regulation defines that tariffs can be in off-grid areas at least 10 kilometers away from the PNG power grid, can be negotiated with the community. So you don't have to just provide the national tariff. But yeah, I hope that answers
That brings
the
me to
question.
another question. Thank you for answering that, Garrick. You know, sometimes the market, that is supply and demand, organically develops, you know, before interjection of government policy or regulation. You know, are there always, or is there always a necessary requirement for rules of the game to come before transaction? Example, GIS, that the sample that you showed us pointed out where there is a body or a community not being serviced. And you just mentioned the opportunity for those who are interested in providing energy services to do so. Is it really required that we have hard regulations in place, or is there opportunity for rethinking how we devise policies and regulations? Do they have to be heavy-handed, or could they be more light-handed, giving the market an opportunity to progress?
Yeah, I think regulations are needed in off-grid areas. In Papua New Guinea, there's you know, as I mentioned, the off-grid regulations haven't been adopted yet. So there's a reluctance from mini-grid developers to develop mini-grids in Papua New Guinea, especially renewable energy mini-grids. So yeah, currently there aren't many renewable energy mini-grids, practically none in Papua New Guinea. And that's due to the risk from the lack of regulation. And when regulation is adopted, what will happen, you know, to the tariffs, to the ownership models. There's a lot of risks in place, and operating in off-grid areas and rural areas is very risky in the first place. You have a lot of customers that may not be able to pay. So, you know, we need to reduce the risks as much as possible for mini-grid developers to come into the space. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Shah, you had mentioned some aspects with regard to financing that really helped with energy efficiency and conservation in Bangladesh. Do you want to add to the off-grid question and affordability and some techniques that can be used from the financial perspective to help with that? Shah, you're on mute.
In Bangladesh, when we had partial electrification, we had many mini grids. We found that the cost of electricity in mini grid is not less than twice the cost of grid connected electricity. And another limitation was that the load growth. When electricity goes to a place, people's affordability increases, their economic activity increases. But the mini grid, especially the solar system, because of the limitation of land, they cannot expand. That was the one limitation. But we found that people are more interested about unlimited or electricity as much as required by them. So what in Bangladesh, what we did is that government said that, okay, the electricity generated by mini grids, we are going to purchase all electricity, we are going to give subsidy, and let there be a flat rate for electricity tariff for all over Bangladesh. That is one thing. This is how this has been solved in Bangladesh.
Thank you. So there was some question about subsidization and redirecting subsidies. And so what you just said goes to that. There was that question earlier during our plenary session with regard to, you know, what do we do with subsidies that are going to traditional hydrocarbons? How do we redirect those to move us toward or accelerate our energy transition? So yes, there's opportunity for discussing that in government policy. Speaking about government policy, Li Ping, we've got a question from participant who wants to know, you know, there's been a growing government interest in support in policy for CCS, particularly in Europe and the UK. Is there a need for similar policy frameworks in Asia? That is, what needs to happen on the policy incentive to make CCS a reality, not just on a pilot scale, but in a more aggressive way here in Asia?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kelly, and thanks to the participant for the question. Government support is just absolutely critical, and we've seen that provide an impetus or a kickstart, if you will, to the CCS projects, to the CCS business, and in Europe. Now, government support can come in various forms, and one form could be a government-led carbon pricing mechanism. And we found that to be a very effective tool that gives choices to energy consumers, to producers. It also allowed stimulation of the market to develop low carbon products, and it certainly helps drive energy efficiency into the system. Until these government-led carbon pricing mechanisms reach levels which support investment in CCS, additional supportive policy measures are required, and this could come in the form of grants, direct subsidies, tax credits, public procurement, for instance. And this has helped, as we've seen in a number of countries in Europe, to incentivize the early investments and to ensure for the CCS scale up as required. I think secondly, it's also absolutely crucial that CCS development is supported by stable cross-border regulatory frameworks. So I talked about country by country where they have government-led carbon pricing mechanisms, but cross-border regulatory framework is equally important. And setting up that policy will then enable deep collaboration between the public and the private sectors, which was also discussed about by Koji-san earlier. Now, I think this can really inject the required support across the board, policy, funding, impetus to start further deepening on technology development, and that would, it's acutely important to have that sort of collaborative framework between public and the private sectors.
Thank you. That's helpful. You touched upon some aspect of private sector involvement that Koji had talked about earlier with regard to building capacity of local banks. And I'm just curious, Koji, you're working in a region, the ASEAN region, and trying to enhance local banks' understanding with regard to risk or certainties on energy efficiency and other alternative energy technology. And how is this more challenging from a regional perspective as compared to a country by country perspective? When you're working with the local banks, are any of them big where they spill over in terms of their business to other countries, or are they singularly located within a local economy? So again, my question is, when working with the banks, Koji, are they all local, or do some of them have a regional presence, the banks themselves? Can you help me with that, Koji?
Thank you for your question. And through my experience, ASEAN local banks so far have not a huge experience to finance such an energy efficiency project or energy efficiency product. So what we are doing is cooperation with other institutions with experiences of such finance, and we will host a workshop or seminar to share the experiences or how to finance such decarbonization project. So sometimes we need support to some Japanese mega banks about to share their experiences, or of course, but some of ASEAN big ASEAN banks have experiences, or sometimes World Bank has kind of have know-how to finance such low carbon technologies projects. So we are doing is to share their way to finance to such energy efficiency or other decarbonization related project. Thank you.
Thank you. Shaw, do you want to add anything in terms of your perspective on trying to look at things from a regional perspective when it comes to improving the capacity and understanding of banks when it comes to energy efficiency? Shah?
Yeah, we have got green fund in our country, and not only that, now banks are having surplus fund. So they found that energy efficiency project is again profitable. So, and at times we find that there are international banks, those who have got surplus fund, their lending rates are much less than the traditional local banks. So funding is no problem for energy efficiency because it has already been proven that its life cycle cost is much less and the return is good. So, and there are many business models which financial institutions, they are also accepting it nowadays.
Thank you. Li Ping, just sticking with finance and CCUS, and we heard from you a little bit with regard to the utilization and storage, as well as transportation. The question is, quite obviously, when it comes to policy, as you stated, there's need for sovereign policy as well as regional policy. When it comes to mitigation of financial risk, and there's opportunity for cross-border trade with regard to the carbon sequestered from CCUS, perhaps to go to a neighboring country for fertilizing soil, for example. Are there other instruments that are not traditional loan or grant instruments that bigger banks can provide, particularly not necessarily just private banks, but multilateral development banks like ADB? What is it that we can do to help mitigate risk when it comes to these new technologies, particularly from a financial perspective?
Well, thanks for that question, Kelly. I think both from the financial as well as also, a technology deployment perspective, those has been the traditional hurdles today to scale up CCS to the level required in order to meet our climate targets. But if you look at where countries have kicked off and have enabled CCS projects for us, particularly in Quest in Canada, and we're actively pursuing a number of opportunities in Europe and also in the US. The cross-border framework comes particularly in a form of, say, cross-border adjustment mechanisms or cross-border policy and framework governed by a specific body. So I'll use the example of London Protocol as one where CCS has relied on to provide some form of cross-border framework or structure, if you will. Nevertheless, even with the London Protocol, you will require bilaterals between the countries. So governments of each of the countries will absolutely need to get together and agree and perhaps come up with either an MOU that further then becomes a more definitive agreement down the road in order to discuss and include areas in which they would like to include for collaboration in order to enable CCS and CCUS as well as you mentioned. And all of that can be supported also in parallel with commercial frameworks working together with IOCs. And I think it's really not a situation where it's one or the other. It's really a scenario of and. And if you look at the scale of everything associated with the global energy transition today, I think we need to take everything out of our toolbox and assess how we are actually able to reframe what we currently have today, and perhaps maybe even create the setup, the structure, the policies, the framework, the financing mechanisms in order to enable CCS to be deployed at scale.
Thank you. I want to go back a bit to off-grid and communities not having access to modern clean energy. We have a question that's come in from a participant asking, are there plans as well in supporting community-led renewable energy projects that only supports access to energy for communities, that not only supports access to communities, but also their livelihoods and the continuity of their low carbon sustainable lifeways. This particular participant wants to hear more about Indigenous people. Garrick, let me ask you if you can comment on that. You all are doing quite a bit, you all being USAID PEP is doing quite a bit of work with regard to off-grid, and the question is some of that work and your familiarity with USAID, not just in PNG but elsewhere, is it also supporting livelihoods and way of life continuity?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So our program is very specifically focused on household electrification, and that includes households throughout the country in rural areas where there isn't the possibility of grid extension or of mini grids because of lack of density. And in those areas, people can continue to live traditional livelihoods by using off-grid solar home systems or standalone solar products. And so they can use these products to replace traditional methods of lighting, including kerosene, candles, firewood, and continue to live traditional livelihoods. I guess when you're referring to Indigenous peoples, Papua New Guinea is basically all Indigenous peoples. So I'm not sure
also bringing in your experience with other areas where similar projects for USAID. So if and in any sort of additional, perhaps Shaw, you could comment with regard to your experience in Bangladesh. We know that there are Indigenous people in the remote hills, and their livelihoods and their way of life are hugely important, the efforts, the sovereign efforts, I should say the collaborative efforts for providing access and providing opportunity for clean energy, and does or did the equation take into consideration the way of life and preserving that and moving forward in Bangladesh?
Thank you, Kelly. In Bangladesh, we had a study, the economic cost of not providing electricity. It was found that the economic cost of not providing 1 kilowatt hour of electricity to an electrified consumer was roughly around 60 cents. That's a big chunk of money. So based on this theory, we went for electrification of entire Bangladesh. And Bangladesh has got one very good thing, that it is the constitutional right of its people to have electricity. So in our hill tracts where it's not possible to have grid access, we have got mini grids there. Then we have got independent solar home system, but mostly government is trying to give them AC electricity, or even if it's DC, but the quantity is not limited. I mean, the volume of electricity should not be limited. And whatever the subsidies required, government, since the economic cost of electricity is around 60 cents, so even if government provides subsidy, overall it's a national gain. In this way, we have got electrification of indigenous people, especially in hill tracts area and other areas. And we are getting benefit of it. We are getting a lot of economic benefit. Our poverty level has decreased, people economic condition have increased, business activities has increased, as you can see.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'd like to go back to Li Ping, if it's okay. Li Ping, someone wants to know, what are the long-term implications of CCS? The question goes to, seems to go to how carbon captured in CCS is utilized. And I think this brings us to an important aspect of talking about pre-combustion versus post-combustion carbon capture, utilization and storage. Post-combustion, there's this risk of carbon going into the atmosphere. But a lot of what we heard during your presentation dealt with in industrial manufacturing and particularly gas-based technologies and a form of more efficient capture than the form of carbon capture that takes place purely from power plant energy generation. So if you could talk a bit about that, that would be helpful so that everyone knows the difference between post-combustion and pre-combustion CCUS and where many of the opportunities are and roadblocks exist.
Thanks for that, Kelly. First, let me address your initial question, I believe, around addressing the perceived safety concerns and the location in which we are storing the CO2. First of all, global storage projects store several million tons of CO2 annually, safely and effectively already. Now, in a carefully selected and developed storage formation, injected CO2 will remain there permanently. And I think that is an important point to stress. We've demonstrated that this can be done through Shell's Quest CCS project, which has been in operations for over 7 years now without any major safety incidents, and 7 years since its startup, of course. However, there are safety and environmental risks that we must manage. For example, we reduce our exposure by carefully selecting storage formations and the design of our CCS facilities, and then identifying the remaining risks and ways to prevent the risk from materializing. This effort brings together our knowledge of risks specific to CO2 with the rigor and learnings we have already developed currently in the oil and gas surface and subsurface operations, as well as a number of non-technical risk considerations. In terms of long-term sequestration, by selecting the storage formation carefully, we will look into ensuring that we assess the geological seals, cap rocks, control of the reservoir pressure, stable formations, etc. Now, when we then start injecting into these geological seals, we use seismic testing to observe the CO2 within the reservoir, and then we constantly compare this to reservoir modeling. During injection, the modeling program then delivers the required data that helps us improve our understanding, helps us to learn as we go, and helps us to manage and get the report out of this monitoring program, and then get that reported back to the regulator. Now, I think the measuring monitoring program has to be agreed with the regulator in a collaborative and certainly in a way where we can assure ourselves as the operator, as well as assuring the regulator that the CO2 would not leak and has not leaked, and thereafter we would then seal the wells. The active engagement with regulators in this regard is absolutely critical, because as we see different risks emerging and different risk profiles, we are then able to manage that in the right way. Again, provided good stores are selected, well integrity standards are maintained, strong collaborative monitoring systems and program with the regulator, demonstration of more than 1,000 years permanence at 99% type level confidence is achievable.
Thank you.
To go back to your question also around technology.
Yes.
So if we look at really what we want to achieve with CCS, it's really not one or the other.
Right.
CCS will require the acceleration of technology development throughout. And again, I think it would be remiss for our industry and experts not to assess and investigate all possible solutions towards achieving the right way of capturing and storing CO2, as well as the most effective way to do that. Now, Shell licenses CO2 capture technology for both pre and post combustion, but I think the important questions and areas that we should discuss here around scaling up is in the acceleration of these technology development and getting them deployed as soon as possible. Doing sufficient research and Shell CO2 abatement technology platforms works across the value chain, and we look at technologies not only in post and pre-combustion CO2 capture, also in decarbonization solutions, CO2 utilization, as well as in our storing and our monitoring technologies. Another area in which I think we need to look into in terms of scaling up would be the ability to actually transport and store the CO2. So it's absolutely critical, for instance, in areas in which we are not able to transport it by pipeline, that we rely on the ability to actually liquefy it and put it onto a ship and then exporting it. Shell Shipping and Marine has played an active role in standardization and leading the standardization of this to enable us to be able to then work on larger ships according to standards that could be replicated easily from one region to another, and to enable us to create the CCS hubs that we are after. That, I think, really supports the efforts of scaling up.
Thank you. Yeah, quite a bit of interesting activity taking place now around CCS, and as you said, and what we heard in the plenary session this morning is that we should not really discount anything, and we should look at all the different technologies and try to further them in bringing us through the transition. I have a question for each of you because we're running out of time. We have only 5 minutes left, and I want you all to answer this question, please. When we speak about the low carbon transition to zero carbon and world temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius, in a nutshell, what is necessary now? Shah, can I begin with you?
From my experience, I will say that the cost of saving 1 megawatt of electricity is less than the cost of producing 1 megawatt of electricity, and emission reduction is the bonus. And as per IEA, energy efficiency is, they call it as the first wave. In the recently concluded 7th Annual Global Conference on Energy Efficiency, they have emphasized that if we can double the rate of energy efficiency, say by 200%, then we can achieve net zero target by 2050, which many countries are afraid that they cannot achieve. And as per IEA, the results are excellent. Global emission can be reduced by 5 billion tons a year, which is equal to 1/3 of emission reduction by 2030. Then household bill will be saved by $650 billion. Natural gas, we can save 4 times the Europe import from Russia last year. And oil reduction will be 30 billion barrels per day, which is equal to 3 times the Russian average. So it's a good thing that energy efficiency has been placed above all to achieve our net emission reduction by 2050.
Thank you. I'm gonna move to Koji, just in the interest of time, to give Koji the opportunity to share with us in a nutshell. When we speak about low carbon transition to zero carbon, and obviously reducing the world temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In a nutshell, Koji, what is necessary now?
Okay, thank you very much. In Japan, we think about energy transition. Many people from energy policy side, this is practical energy transition. It means we cannot switch conventional energy such as oil and gas to renewable energy in one day. We have to, of course, time period to switch one way to switch conventional energy to renewable or new energy. So we have to speed up, of course, the technology development or something. But in the parallelly, we change our energy policy gradually according to each country's situation. So in Japan's case, Japan is import all over fuel, fossil fuel. Also, of course, we have to decrease in dependency, but it's not it's change. We cannot change in one day. So we have to some certain time period. We have to change many energy policy or our action gradually practically. It is our situation now. Thank you.
Thank you, Koji. Li Ping, can I go to you next?
Absolutely, Kelly. So, I'd like to reiterate that what I have heard, at least a number of governments and organizations saying, and they have publicly said that the widespread use of CCS is essential to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. Now, there's also wide agreement that to accomplish this, it is necessary to start permanently storing CO2 at scale by 2030. I think the IEA calls for investments around 1 billion per year on CCUS actually, solutions between 2025 and 2030. That is a significant amount of investment, but I also see that it is a great opportunity for the region to reduce the cost of rural energy transition, and certainly by collaborating with each other, public-private collaboration to foster economic growth. I'll leave it at that, Kelly.
Thank you, Garrick. What you have to say is important. Last but not least, please, I'd like to have your perspective.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, I think what we have to do now is rich countries have to take action to transition to renewable energy, to low carbon energy sources, and whatever it takes, CCS as well. But at the same time, millions of people are gaining access to electricity. Economic growth is happening in developing countries, and those countries need to be supported in transitioning to clean energy as well. So, as an example, in Papua New Guinea, there's a lot of people that will take the short-term option of getting diesel generators or petrol generators to get electricity, and they're extremely inefficient. And there's better options out there that are cleaner, but in the short term, they're more expensive. So they need to be supported to transition to clean energy sources.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to moderate this important session on integrating low-carbon technologies to accelerate the energy transition. Communication and collaboration platforms like Government of Japan's Renki Control, GIS technologies that accurately assess unserved energy markets and demand to better ensure energy access for all and inclusive growth, the importance of carbon capture technologies, and the ever-present need for continued energy efficiency, renewable and conservation technology and policies, and enabling an immediate low-carbon transition to net zero carbon emission economies in Asia and the Pacific region is something that we all have to give attention to. So thank you, Koji, Garrick, Li Ping, and Shah for each of your invaluable contributions to today's discussion. All ASEF participants here with us during this session, indeed, thank you. This session on integrating low-carbon technologies to accelerate the energy transition has now come to an end. Again, thank you and goodbye.